looking for a TV platform to advertise your products? If so, you've come to the right place. We're proud to be the platform of your choice, and customer satisfaction is our #1 priority. Let our television platform help you advertise your product and services. No matter where your prospective clients are, we have the media resources to reach them. We offer the most affordable prices, and a trial will convince you. So, contact us now and find out why so many local customers come to us for all of their advertising needs.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Aidoo show, the show that aims to inspire you, educate you, and join you in living our best lives. This has been a fantastic a week of beautiful weather and a week of shopping for flowers. As you all know, last year I did the balcony garden and afternoon tea with Auntie Anna, where we sipped tea, we read books, and we enjoyed the flowers. So I'm excited. This week I've been working on the garden and can't wait to come to you with excerpts from various books for you to enjoy. It's always on Facebook Live. Join me for afternoon tea with Auntie Anna. It's going to be every Sunday starting from July. Today, I am happy to welcome Prof. Mfoafo McCarthy, and we're delving into something that I find is very critical in our lives, our mental health. How do we identify what mental health issues are? How do we identify that we're having mental health problems? How do we seek the help that we need? But in the meantime, and as always, let me bring you the poem for today. The poem for today is entitled Happiness. And it says, what is happiness, I hear you say? What helps us smile on those dreary days? What sends a tingle through our bones? What helps us talk in cheerful tones? How does it pick? How does it choose when to come and when to move? How does it know to work its way through every single person like me and you? Some people try so hard as they can to steal it away from another man, but it's yours forever. It's yours to keep. Don't let them take something so deep. You must look within yourself when times are blue, because happiness is a thing that lives in you. I love this poem. Why do I love it? I love it because it guides us to our own strength in our journey of hope, inspiration, and happiness, instead of depending on circumstances or other people. So we're not going to waste any more time. Let's welcome Prof. McCarthy and enter into the conversation of mental health and well-being.
Good afternoon.
Prof. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. Thank you once again for agreeing to do this. As I said to you in our discussions over the week, this is a very important thing, at least for me right now, for us to dig into this whole issue of mental health, cases and circumstances and issues. So in order not to ruin who you are, I always ask the guest to tell us about themselves and what they do.
Thank you, Anna, and I appreciate the opportunity to have me here. My name is Magnus Mfoafo McCarthy, and I'm an associate professor at Wilfrid Laurier University at the Faculty of Social Work. And I've been there for the past about 10 years. And my area of research is on community mental health, disability, and also exploring issues of stigma as it relates to mental health as well. My work is solely based on, in fact, I do some work in Canada. I did mental health practice in Canada for about 10 years before going into academia. And also I do quite a bit of work in Ghana, and I've done some work in Eswatini, that is Swaziland.
Okay.
And also maybe my hope is maybe exploring other parts of Africa as well, addressing issues of stigma and mental health, yes.
Wow, that is deep. And I'm glad, in all our research, we found a person such as you who has the vast experience across, globally. That way we're speaking to not just a small group of people, we're speaking to a big group of people. So my first question is, when we say mental health, right, what do we mean? I want us to go from the basic as possible, so that anybody that is watching that maybe is going through and maybe doesn't know what that means may be able to see where it relates to them and their circumstances.
Thank you very much, Anna, for the question. So before I go into that, perhaps maybe I'll try and differentiate between this idea of periodically we talk about mental health, and also we talk about mental well-being, what it is.
Yes.
So I'll just try and give a little definition of what it is, what both are, and maybe try and explain it as well. So according to Health Canada, we describe, or maybe we try to define mental health as a condition that is characterized by changes in a person's mood and behavior that causes significant distress and impaired function. What do we mean by that? I can wake up in a day and I will feel down and not feel like going to work, not feel like interacting with people, feel like locking my door and sleeping in my room. That is okay. It's part of our day-to-day activities. Periodically, we have that blah. We use the word blah kind of life, where we just don't feel like doing certain things. But when it continues for a period of time, it affects the way we do things. It affects the way we interact with family members, the way we interact with even the community, our social lives. It affects even our jobs or even our education and other things. Then perhaps we need to look at it in terms of, well, something isn't right somewhere, and we need to find a way of fixing it. And that is where we need to seek help. So we need to be conscious of that. It's not always that we need to be alarmed and say, well, I have a mental health issue. But from time to time, it's worth maybe checking in with a counselor or what have you. I think we can have a conversation with the counseling piece later. And that is what we look at. And also there are certain characteristics, based on, we have different forms of diagnosis. In terms, when we talk about mental health is a broad topic, and we have various aspects of diagnosis where we can have depression. Even under depression, we have manic depression and others, right? And then we have others like anxiety, and then we move on to the serious mental illness being schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, and the list goes on and on. But there is a criteria that you'd have to meet, So it says, well, if you have A, B, C, D, and you've had it for a period of time, then perhaps you need to consider yourself that. And in the field of mental health or psychiatry, as we put it, the main book that we use, we call it a Bible of mental health. We call it it's called a DSM. DSM right now, I think we use a DSM-5. And that is the book that is used, and it gives the criteria. I mean, everything, the stating, the condition and things. If you had it for this number of days or months or what have you, then you fit the criteria. And that ties in with mental health. Now, when we talk about mental well-being is a state of well-being in which one realizes his or her own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life. You can work productively and fruitfully and be able to contribute to your community. So mental well-being is a state in which you're able to get on with your life. Periodically, we encounter the challenges, the difficulties, and yet we're able to pick ourselves up and we are able to move on. So when you find yourself in that state, that is what we mean by mental well-being.
Okay.
So in the field of social work, periodically we use this term, we call it homeostasis. And homeostasis means some form of equilibrium in life, or some form of balance. So despite the challenges and other things that are thrown at you, that you find yourself encountering and other things, yet you're able to move on and you're able to live well. It doesn't really put you down, or it doesn't really affect you seriously, so that is what we're trying to say by that. So by mental well-being, that is what we're talking about.
Okay, so from what you said, there's the mental well-being aspect of it, where yes, you're experiencing all these difficulties, but you're being able to function. Even with all the difficulties, you're being able to function at a normal place. And then there's the other side of mental health, where you're not being able to function properly. You're down a lot of the time. You're not able to mix and mingle with people. You're not able to deal with the stresses that life presents to you. That is what I got from this first part of what you said.
Right. So let me clarify it a little bit more. So how is your mental well-being? And we can ask that question all the time. Usually people use mental well-being in place of mental health, right? So I can ask, how is your mental well-being? And all that I'm asking is, how are you doing mentally? How are things? How are you coping with life, the challenges and other things? And somebody can also ask, how is your mental health? Right, but what is happening is because of this, what do you call it, the stigma that is associated with the use of the word mental health. You can decide to use both interchangeably. Okay. How are you doing? How is your well-being? How is life treating you, and how are you getting along? So the moment we talk about your mental health, what people think is they think about a negative aspects. Hey, is there a sign of maybe schizophrenia or what have you, and those things? So that is what we mean by that. So I just thought of maybe describing both just to give clarity to the definitions. Yeah.
Yes. Well, that is very, very important. So sometimes I wonder, when we talk about mental health, right? Sometimes I wonder, does everybody have some kind of mental health issue? Is it, you know what I mean? Does every one of us walking around, because nobody's free of trouble, right? So could it be said that each one of us walking around has some kind of mental health issue? It's all about how it's affecting you or not affecting you. Am I correct?
Yeah, I'm yet to see a world where we would say everybody is perfect. Right, we all have something small. I mean, some aspects of it, right? I remember in Ghana there used to be this saying, this proverb, and the saying is that if you have been diagnosed with mental illness and you go to a mental institution and you are taken care of, treated, despite the treatment and everything, there's a little bit there. There's a Ghanaian proverb. Personally, I see it as more of feeding into the stigma that is associated with mental illness.
Yeah.
But based on your question, I think we all have, certain aspects of us that maybe people may think is weird. When we're in school, secondary school, people use the word weird. You are weird in a way, and I remember when I was in secondary school, I had a friend, I think just about going to university. What happens is because of the heat in Ghana, I tend to wash my hands a lot. And I remember she was then in nursing training, and she used to use this word upset. She had been introduced to mental health courses and other things, and they've been taught obsessive compulsive disorder.
Right.
So by me washing my hands on a regular basis, she used the word obsessive compulsive because she felt I was being obsessive and things. But for me, I was washing my hands because of the sweat and things that I felt in my palm. Right. So I think we all have weird ways of doing things, and a little bit of that. But there are certain circumstances that come our way. It could be perhaps maybe because of trauma, because of environment, because of even genetics and other things. It may perhaps maybe progress and make it a bit worse. Yeah.
So in other words, we all have a little something in us that will say it's a little off balance.
I wouldn't dispute that, honestly. I would think we all have a little quirk, about us.
I like that, a little quirk. But it's all just a matter of finding ways to deal with your little quirks, right? And to hopefully not cause any damage to yourself or other people.
Brilliant.
So you and I coming from the African community, the Ghanaian community and all of that, and you touched on it a little bit with that thing about once you go for treatment, there's a little there, right? We have a way of saying it in such a way that even when you're struggling, you're afraid to look for help, right? Wabodam, mene seke. And the way we put it so negatively. And sometimes all you need is a little help to maybe talk to somebody or to have somebody listen to you. Or sometimes it's just a matter of being truthful with yourself so that you can move on to other things. How do we then deal? And how do you and I find a way to educate our people to understand that it is just a matter of seeking help, understanding, or whatever? What role do we have to play? And with anybody watching who knows within themselves that they're struggling with something, what can you tell that person? Because it's important for me when people watch this to take something away that they can use for themselves.
Thank you. Well, let me start from this point. Usually I tell people that if there is a place that is really conducive in providing support with people who've been diagnosed with mental health, I would say it's Ghana. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because we have a communal society. Mm-hmm. And there have been instances where I've told people that I found myself to be where I am because of the communal nature. There's this saying that it takes a village to raise a child. And the reason being that your neighbor, when he or she sees you on the street misbehaving, may report it to your dad or your mom, and you'll be punished at home. Mm-hmm. So the first 5 years of my life, I attended a day high school, and I had colleagues who used to run away from school around midday to go and watch movies and other things. And I couldn't go because of that fear that a neighbor might see me and report to my dad, and that helped me stay focused at school.
Right.
So the essence of it is that it's communal, it's community. We take care of one another. However, when it comes to the issue of mental illness, we don't want to talk about it because we see it as a taboo, a no-go area. Let me put it that way, a no-go area, because we don't want to touch it even with a 10-foot pole. And that creates some form of problems in our community. And there are a number of factors why people don't want to talk about it. It's generational. It's really been with us since time immemorial, where even in our culture, there's the belief that if you're going to marry somebody and they realize that they have siblings or there's somebody in the family who has mental illness, they tell you it's a no-go area kind of thing. So a lot of people keep these things to themselves.
Yes.
Recently, somebody sent me an article, in fact, just this week, they said at the psychiatric unit in Accra right now, there are about 300 plus inmates or inpatients who have been cured, who've been treated, who've been treated, but they cannot be discharged because they can't find family members. They can't find family members in the sense that family members have really
pushed them out,
dissociated themselves from these individuals. And I remember years ago, I read a research that talked about even some, when they send their family members to the hospital, they give wrong names, wrong addresses, wrong phone numbers. So they stay there for a long time. And when it gets to discharge, they contact these numbers, these addresses, and they can't reach anyone. So the families have distanced themselves from them. And it all speaks to the stigma that is associated with mental illness. Perhaps maybe we can talk about the stigma piece later. So based on your question, what can we do? In the midst of our struggles and other things, how can we reach out? I would think the only way we can do that is engaging in that conversation, having that discourse with regard to mental illness, and let people know that it's not anything, it's not abstract, it's not anything extraordinary. Because the argument that I often make is that if perhaps maybe my tummy hurts, and people will sympathize with me or even empathize with me that my tummy hurts, why wouldn't they want to empathize with me and also support me if maybe something relating to, what is up here? And that is the challenge. Those are some of the problems we have, because a lot of people tend to associate mental illness with violence, mental illness with all the negatives that you can think about. So as a result, they distance themselves. I've had people ask this question, whether the clients or maybe the people that I work with, whether they beat me, whether they are violent to me. And the question that I ask is whether, if you're a doctor, I mean, the person asking the question, if the person is a lawyer or what have you, ask a similar question, whether your clients, they harm you, right? So we need to have that conversation to let them know that, hey, these are people like you and I. We all have our foibles in terms of mistakes and other things. And there are times we may find ourselves maybe experiencing this. But the fact that we're experiencing these symptoms is not the end of the world. What we need is empathy, that sympathy, that support. You know, even at times, all that you need is just an ear. An ear, somebody to let you know, hey, I hear you and I can understand what you're going through. Or somebody to accompany you to appointments and other things to let you know that it's not the end of the world. That is all that we need. Because the reason why I use Ghana as an example is the fact that I say, based on the communal nature of society, is that in Canada, it's more individualistic. Yeah. So when you are going through some of these challenges, more often than not, you go through it alone. Yeah. But in a place like Ghana, you have the aunties, you have the cousins, you have, and even the neighbors who care. So we need to start changing the conversation, the tone of the conversation with regard to mental illness. And I believe that if we're able to make that change and start looking at it differently as also part of the body, perhaps maybe we can make an inroad with regard to that.
You know, sometimes, you know, we often talk about he's educated, she's educated, and that he's educated, she's educated, put some of us or some people in a box where we think we have to present a perfect front, right? So that we're hiding behind the PhDs and the masters, and yet we know deep down within that we're struggling. We often like to associate people that are money-wise poor with mental health issues, right? So I have many friends and all of that who we're all struggling. So what message can you give us? I'm saying us because I struggle, and sometimes I find it difficult to talk about my struggles because I'm perceived a certain way. So what can you tell those of us who feel like we have an education, so we're supposed to be perfect, we're not supposed to be taught, we're not supposed to seek the help that we need? What can you tell us?
Well, let me put it this way. Mental health is not, or mental illness is not a respecter of persons.
Thank you.
It affects people irrespective of your level of education, irrespective of your socioeconomic status, irrespective of the color of your skin, irrespective of where you come from in the world. Now, according to the World Health Organization, mental illness affects about a quarter of our population in one way or the other. All right. So what they mean is that it affects us, perhaps some of us not physically, but it affects us maybe emotionally. Somebody you work with. You may know somebody you work with, somebody you live with, somebody you interact with, somebody you know in the community. So the list goes on and on and on. So when they say 1 out of 4, that means anytime you walk on the street and you see 4 people, 1 out of them may have been impacted in one way or the other by mental illness. So that speaks to how pervasive this illness is in our society. And I think it's about time we start thinking about it outside the box. Because when we put it in a box and we think it's a poor man's illness or it's a poor man's disease or what have you, we've missed it, because we are all what do you call it, vulnerable, and it could affect us in any way, shape, or form. So I think we need to have that conversation. So the question that we have, because of maybe this person has a PhD or this person has an LLM or what have you, they don't have to have the illness, and unfortunately, because they've had it, we have to hide it and what have you. I think we are doing more harm than good. And what we need to do is we need to feel comfortable, you know, and my hope is that as time goes on, we are going to feel comfortable being able to talk about it and its impact on our lives, because it's really important. You know, it's really a serious issue, and I think it's worth having that conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. It is truly worth having that conversation. So I want to tell anybody that is watching right now that every last Saturday of the month, Mr. McCarthy and I will be coming to us with a different subject under this topic of mental health so that we can all cope a little bit with life, because life can be difficult, but without addressing the issues that we're all facing. And mind you, this is also for me to help me also deal with some of life circumstances. So I'm not coming at this from a place of an outsider. I'm coming from a place of somebody who needs some kind of help. And that is why I have an expert, so that we're not coming from a place of not knowing what we're talking about. So if you're struggling, every last Saturday of the month, unless the prof is busy or tired, then we have to give him a little break to rest a bit. But if you can give us an example of a challenging situation that we call mental illness, how can one identify? The reason I ask this question is, in North America, I don't know about Ghana, but a lot of times when I see people cause damage or they do something very serious to somebody and they're taken to court or something, sometimes they're let go because they say the person had a mental issue. So please give us an example. I'm just trying for us to understand, to see it with the naked eye so that we can address it before it gets to the place where we cause so much damage to another person.
Yeah, usually such cases, they tell them you are found not guilty by reason of insanity. And in Canada, the measure of really coming to that conclusion is perhaps maybe during the course of the trial, the accused is assessed by a psychiatrist, a professional, who is able to identify that this person has this illness and other things. It's been used a lot in the Western world, and particularly when you look at the United States, anytime there is that, what do you call it, killings and other things, they associated with mental illness. It's not, from our point of view, perhaps maybe I'm not an expert in that regard, so I can't really say why every situation or maybe gun killings should be associated with it. But I think, as we're talking about this idea of the homeostasis, the balance or the equilibrium in our lives, we all find ourselves being raised in different environments. It could be an environment of abuse. It could be an environment of perhaps maybe experiencing trauma. It could be an environment where, you name it, the list goes on. And we grow with a lot of this hurt and this pain and other things. And somewhere along the line, it affects us. And its effect can even go to the point of even impacting our thought process, the way we perceive things, the way we interact with people and other things. And there have been instances where some of these, without seeking help, it's led people into committing certain criminal offenses and other things. And the consequence turned out to be a bit serious. So it's important that we always look out for family members when we think, or maybe when we observe and we feel things ain't right, perhaps being supportive of them and encouraging them to go for maybe see a counselor or maybe have a support system or something like that. With that, perhaps maybe we'll be able to avoid or prevent some of these things from happening. And earlier on, you used this word, causing harm to the self or to the other. Now, in Canada, we have a form that is often issued by psychiatrists or maybe physicians, with regard to individuals who perhaps maybe whose behavior tend not to, maybe based on what family members describe, is not appropriate. And usually what they look out for is whether the person is a danger to him or herself or a danger to others. And if you can check those boxes that the person is a danger to themselves or to others, then perhaps maybe you can call the police to come in and apprehend the person and take the person to the hospital to be checked for a period of time. So those are some of the circumstances that we have around. Yeah.
So when we talk about this whole mental health situation, and I'm kind of zoning in on our African community, because this is where I find, when I first came to Canada, and I would watch talk shows, and people would say, when I was growing up, my mom did this. And when I was growing up, my mom did that. And when I was growing up, I wasn't laugh. When I was growing up, I wasn't careful. I used to laugh when I first came to Canada. And I would say things like, wow, you people are so spoiled. Look at you. You need to move on with your life. And then as I grew up in Canada and started experiencing my own thing and started reading and learning, I realized, oh my God, we are in trouble, right? So in our African community, please help us shed a little light on the urgency, the need for all of us to be quick in seeking the help, in relieving ourselves of this pressure. Because I don't think many of us know that the way we grew up, the style in which we grew up, has affected us one way or the other. I don't think many of us know that. So can you shed a light on that for us so that we can help ourselves? It's almost urgent for me.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the way we've been raised plays a very important role in who we are and our behavior and how we look at life. We come from a culture where there are certain things that we've learned. So, for instance, this idea of even when you're talking to an older person, you don't make eye contact. I see that's more of a cultural thing, which is okay. But maybe the slightest provocation, you'll be insulted in a certain way, or slapped, and other things. And I think these experiences, growing up in this environment, psychologically affect us. I remember having a conversation with a friend not very long ago who shared this story with me. He said when he was in high school, was it high school? I think either high school or primary school, something, one of those areas. I think SSS, yeah. And he did an assignment and the teacher gave him 68. But when he got his paper and he checked the answers and everything, he realized that he shouldn't have gotten 68. The teacher should have given him about 92 or plus. Better. So he went to the teacher and the teacher looked at it, looked everything, checked everything. And the teacher's response was, "Do you want me to give you 0? And he said, "No, sir." So there, your self-esteem has been impacted in one way or the other.
It's short.
If I've been this part of the world, the student is capable of challenging you, not in a disrespectful way, but at least letting you know that, hey, and that is how I put it, that we all learn, even as a teacher in a classroom, we all learn. And when you look at things from that perspective, it helps, right? There's another story recently I heard about a kid. This kid is about, I think, 10 years old or something, and she started not liking school. And we're having this conversation with the mother, and the mother said apparently the child was given a homework and she didn't do it. And when she went to school, she was beaten to the extent that there were marks on the children. Now, you've traumatized this kid. And anytime she would associate school with this beating and other things. So imagine the children that we are raising. All right. So it in fact impacts our self-esteem, our mental well-being, other areas of our lives. So it's important. And we need to know something, that words are powerful. What we tell our kids, what we tell our students, the way we address them, and all these things play a very important role. And over the years, one of the things that I realized is a lot of our international students, especially those who are coming to undergrad, for a lot of them, for the first year of their being in Canada or even the United States, they are a bit timid.
And struggle. And
they struggle, and it takes them a while to adjust. And I remember this experience. Growing up, I did my undergrad in Ghana, where I had to, and we were made to address our professors by their titles, and so professor this. And their fear is that if you don't address the person by the title, the tendency for you to perhaps maybe not do well in exam is fine. And why am I saying that? I'm saying this because it also affects our self-esteem in terms of the way we see authority figures and even our thought process and other things. So there's a lot that has affected us in our growing up and all these things. So I think that, yes, I wouldn't say that based on that, we need to also live like the West. But what is important is ask ourselves, how can we engage with our children? How can we engage with our family members? How can we engage with our students in a respectful manner? You know, where we'll be able to draw the strength and the abilities that they have to make them better people. Children who are able to think, you know, deeply and be able to come up with innovative ideas and how to be creative and other things. Because if we don't do that and we tend to punish them for the slightest provocation, what we are doing is we are really stifling, you know, the abilities that God has placed in them. So these are some of the things that we need to be looking at. And as we grow up with a lack of support, with a lack of love and everything, it also affects our mental health. Why is it that we hear stories of people who are doing well? I remember 2 years ago or 3 years ago or something, there was this lady, I think she worked at a bank or something, who committed suicide by jumping from, I think, the third floor of the bank or something in Ghana. And the question that we may want to ask is, did we see this coming? How did this happen? What were the circumstances leading to this? Everybody will be seeing this woman as a banker, a respectful person in the community.
Thank you.
Yet when something of that nature happens, the question that we ask ourselves is, how did it happen? And more often than not, we tend to attribute it to perhaps maybe witchcraft or, you know, all those things. But I think it's about time we start looking within and start asking ourselves the pertinent questions with regard to our interactions, how we love one another, how we care for one another, how we relate to one another as well.
So for those of us that have grown up in Ghana under the guise of you don't look at an adult when you're talking to them, when an adult is sitting, you don't pass, you know, this and that and that. This is ingrained in us, right? And now that we're living in North America and we talk about interaction with our children, usually when I'm interviewing, I take cues from what the person is saying. So some of the questions may not be like we set out to do, but I take cues from what the person is saying. Our children, the children that we have born, you know, given birth to and raised here, are coming from a completely different mindset, right? From what we know. I'm finding that we have grown up in fear. We have grown up in almost being fake because we haven't been taught to be truthful to ourselves. We've been taught to be the perfect people and all of that. And I find that we're struggling with raising our children. I'm saying this because so many of us are struggling. How do we cope with this? Because this is our life now, right? This is our life now where our children, sometimes we like to say, in Ghana, for no, the Ghanaian children and this and that. But how do we cope with this? This is a serious topic within our communities, the African communities. How do we cope with this?
Yeah, I don't know if maybe I'm an expert in this area and I can advise, but let me share a little that I think we should really explore. I mean, should be thinking through. I'm inclined to think that a lot of us, we tend to raise our children, even though we are in North America, we tend to raise our children as if we are in Ghana. And it's a bit of a challenge, you know. So periodically we have to take things, we say things like, don't talk back to me. Don't do this, right? So I remember when my children were young and we were raising them, you would ask them to turn off the TV. And the first question they may ask is, why?
That why question. Oh.
Now, in Ghana, I dare not ask my dad why.
No.
The moment they ask me to turn off the TV, I'm going to turn off the TV. The moment they ask me to stand up, I'm going to stand up, you know. But here, the environment has made them realize, you know, school and other things, that they have to ask questions. And I think that is how they learn. You need to be able to explain to the child. So assuming in Ghana, if I were to say why to my dad, I'll get my first slap.
That's right.
So assuming you decide to punish your kid for asking that question. One thing they know is that they also need to call authorities because mom has done this, right? And as a result, you bring in the social services and other things, and it affects what have you. But what we need to ask ourselves is, what is this environment? How can we engage these children? So instead of maybe spanking, we were raised with spanking. So instead of spanking, how can you have a conversation with the child to explain the circumstances and other things? So there are a number of areas, issues that we need to explore so far as raising children in this part of the world is concerned, because the environment is different, the culture here is different, everything is different, right?
Education is different.
Yes. So it's important that we familiarize ourselves with the educational system, with the environment and everything. And if we're able to explore that, that would help us in raising and engaging with our children. Because if we don't do that, society will take care of our children. Yes. And they will be who they are because they will be going with the flow. Now, imagine you dressing, having a son and dressing with the pants maybe towards around the knee area or what have you. You dare not step out of the house in a place like Ghana, right?
No.
But here it's becoming the norm. So how can we engage, have a conversation with them, to let them know that these things, perhaps even having a conversation in terms of the genesis of these pants. Wearing the pants that way. I understand it originated from the prison system. I'm not familiar. I've not read about it. But when we're able to have these conversations with these kids, it helps. Else, we lose them and our friends, or the community will be in charge in terms of seeing what goes on in our community. Yeah.
Thank you on that. That is such a core thing, because a lot of times we talk about, our community kids are in prison and this and that. And it makes me wonder, why so many? Because, well, for some of us, going to prison means that's the end of you. Whereas here in North America, going to prison could be the beginning of a new life where you change your ways and you're given the support that you need. That is why I asked that question. So we know that we grew up a certain way, and some of us, it's ingrained in us and all that. But how do we as a people now encourage our own, those of us that have grown up the way we've grown up? How do we talk to each other? How do we encourage each other without feeling like, oh, what a shame. Oh, this is so bad. How do we do that? Because I believe dialogue will help all of us. How do we do that without feeling like we're putting the other person down? The other person doesn't feel like you're putting them down or calling their names. You know what I mean? How do we do that?
So are we looking at this in light of mental health?
Yes.
Right. So I think there's a lot of factors here. When, especially those of us in the diaspora, the odd seem to be somewhat against us. What I mean by the odd being against us is that we find ourselves in an environment where we are struggling with a lot of things. Number one, the socioeconomic environment. Some of us, we have certain professions back home, and we are here working in areas where perhaps maybe it's not what we're trained for, or even below us and things like that, number one. Number two, there is this thing that because of George Floyd, we are talking about it now, systemic racism. And because of who we are and things, and it's impacting us, in our day-to-day activities. So there's a lot that is against us. And I think what we need to do is, it's important for us to build trust. Trust goes a long way, because when you look at other immigrants, certain communities, they have that connection, that unity, where they're able to support people to set up businesses and other things. I think we lack that in our community. And I think we need to, if we're able to build that trust, because some people, because of there's a lack of trust because they've been burned. What I mean by burned is that maybe they share their secrets to other people, and people went sharing the gossiping or talking to others about it. Right. So how can we build that trust where if I'm not feeling well, I can pick up my phone and call you and say, hey, Anna, today I think I'm not doing okay. So is there a way by which perhaps maybe you can be there for me for the next couple of days or something? And if we can build that trust, that would go a long way. Now, the other thing we need to do is, I think we also need to one thing I know based on my work is the fact that a lot of us, because we've not been exposed to counseling way back home and other things, we think people who seek counseling are weaklings, so we dare not explore that. But I think it's really important that we do that. We check in, or we have somebody, a counselor or somebody that we look up to that we think can give us advice, that we check in from time to time. These things are healthy. I was surprised a couple of years ago when I read about Rick Warren, who said periodically he and his wife, they go for counseling to check. He says, we go in to tweak things. And I think it's important. And they've been together for a long time. And if we can explore that, I think it will make us better people. But it all boils down to perhaps maybe changing our, having some mental reconditioning, changing our thought process with regard to the way we perceive counselors. And I'm saying this because I remember when I started at Laurier, I was engaging in a research project, and I was trying to interview people from the African continent, people from the racialized people from Africa with regard to the experience with mental illness. So I was directed to a community leader from an African country that I'm not going to name. And during the course of conversation, one of the things he said is that, well, we Africans, we don't believe in counseling. And I was blown away. And this individual happened to come from a war-torn country, where, some of the abuses that people have to go through, you can't comprehend.
Yes.
And I was blown away by that. And that speaks to the perception of a lot of people in our community. We feel that perhaps maybe paying a little money here and there to go see somebody is a waste of money and it's not part of our culture. But believe you me, it's really very helpful, and it will be money well spent. And I think it's about time we start having that conversation, because we need that.
Thank you. Please repeat that counseling part again. Please repeat it so that we can hear it loud and clear, because I think I'm at a place where I'm like, that struggle is not necessary to carry on forever till you die. There's a life to live. So please hint on the fact that it's a necessity. It's almost a necessity to go for counseling.
Oh, yeah, it is. And it will surprise you to realize that some of the prominent people that we look up to in our society and other things, a lot of them have been through counseling, and they talk about where they've been and how far they've come and how it's helped them and other things. And I think it's about time we do that. But I think with a lot of us, what we would say is that, well, I'm not used to that. It's not part of my culture growing up, number one. Number two, maybe paying a little over $100 or something. It's a lot of money, and I don't want to spend that. Or perhaps maybe you look at it in terms of, well, it's a sign of weakness. But looking at it, I think I see it as an investment that you're going to benefit, you're going to reap, because it's going to affect your mental well-being, the way you perceive the world and the way you interact with others, and other things. So I'll recommend it. I think I'll highly recommend it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It is my hope that anybody listening or that will listen at a later time will, in fact, take the step to seek the help that is needed, so that we don't have to go to the extreme of things, to help ourselves, to help our children, to help community and society at large. So then there's this thing where we say in Ghana, this person is crazy. Like I said before, that person is crazy. So sometimes we hide behind, we put up a front, and then we hide behind walking around with double personalities, right? Again, for me, it's important that we give people the tools that is needed to release ourselves from such living. Again, help us, tell us something that will help us to know that seeking help doesn't mean we're crazy. Tell us something so that somebody who's sitting there afraid, because it looks like our upbringing has impacted us and has drowned us in fear, so that every step we make or don't make is hiding behind something. Help us release that, please.
Yeah, thank you. Hopefully I will be able to share something meaningful. The reason why I'm saying this is that I think it's this idea and our fear of mental illness is so ingrained in our society so much that we always want to distance ourselves from it. And that makes it very, very difficult, right? So I think what is really important is that we try to, I mean, like I said earlier, the conversation, number one, and also the use of words, even to describe people. These days, I tell my students that I feel uncomfortable even with the use of the word crazy or mad. I'll just challenge you to make this observation. Listen to teenagers having a conversation. He's so crazy. You are so crazy, and they use the word just like that. But I think it has a negative impact on people as time goes on, right? Because of the mental illness and things. And as you were asking the question, I was thinking about a study that we did years ago. What we did is we tried to look at newspaper articles. We used the Daily Graphic, the Ghanaian Times, and other newspapers for a 10-year period. I think from 2003 or something to about 2013, I think, something like that. And we did a study looking at articles that had been written on mental illness. And we were surprised to realize that almost all of them were negative. They had that negative connotation. A mentally deranged person has killed somebody, and mentally something. And the choice of words, describing them as violent and what have you, the list goes on and on. So when you read these things, even if you have it, you don't want anybody to know that you have it. So you suffer in silence. And that is the problem we have. And that is a challenge because we don't have the avenue in Ghana for us to have the conversation. And I think one area that perhaps maybe we can also have this conversation would be even the churches. But in the church, what I know is we have prayer camps where people with the illnesses are chained. And some of them 24 hours in the sun, in the rain, at night, by a tree or something. When you see something like that, even if you have the illness, you feel uncomfortable coming up. How many of us would want to live this kind of life? So the way people have been treated hasn't been fair. And it all boils down to the negativity that is associated with it. So how about changing the narrative and looking at the positives, regarding that, and seeing that it could be me, it could be you. So how do we start looking at people differently? And how do we support them in our society? And I think when we do that, it will be very healthy. Because if I see that, why would I want to go and tell somebody, well, I'm exhibiting these symptoms and for others to know that I've been through this? And I think it's about time we change that mindset. So far as seeking help is concerned, it's important that we know that we cannot go through this alone.
Thank you. So for those of us here that have come from Ghana and are now professionals and living in our beautiful homes and things like that, but we know that we are struggling. You gave us the example of Ghana, right? But it's very easy to cover up our pain and our sorrow and our fears and all of that here in North America, particularly in our African community. We can speak on that because we're in that community. It's not that we're ignoring anybody else. How do we cope? Because I come across so many women, which is another topic altogether, who are complaining, but don't know which way to go. So how do we cope with this? This is right here.
Yes. Thank you very much. And you said it rightly. We all go through it and we all have the challenges. How do we feel comfortable talking about it? So let me use a case, a scenario here. Was it early this month? If either early this month or maybe late last month, there is this tennis star by name Naomi Osaka.
Yes.
Now, Naomi is one of the outstanding tennis players in the world, not in the US, in the world. And she decided to withdraw from I think the Paris Open or something. And one of the tennis games playing and those things. And she cited anxiety, something relating to her mental health. And the media had a field day, poking fun at her and other things. And also, I think she was fined, for withdrawing from this game because in the world of tennis, having such players draws crowd and brings a lot of money, and those things. But I would say kudos to somebody like Naomi Osaka for realizing that she's human. For realizing that irrespective of the heights that she had achieved, she also suffers from some form of a mental illness.
Yes.
And hence deciding to take time to seek help. And I think in our community, our environment, the challenge that we all face is maybe, people who use the word, I don't want to lose face. How are people going to see me? How are they going to perceive me? But I think at the end of the day, we need to look at our lives this way. That is not how much or how people perceive you, but it's how much you take care of yourself.
Amen.
The care, self-care, we call something self-care, making time for yourself. So self-care is not a matter of perhaps going only to the spa and getting the pedicure and the manicure, but also being able to even meet with a shrink, that is a therapist, who perhaps have that conversation and work with you, work through some of these things. So none of us is immune. It could be anybody at all. It could be anyone. I remember years ago, I met a psychiatrist somewhere. We're having this conversation, and this guy happened to be based in Germany, and he was telling me about, clients that he sees from, numerous parts of Africa. So it looks as the elites in our continent send their, family members abroad for help because they have the resources. They don't want people to know. So all that I'm saying is that, like I said earlier, no respecter of persons, whether finances or what have you. So we are all in this together. And I think it's about time we try to come together and be able to support one another, be there because we are each other's keeper. And it's important we look at it this way, because if we decide to cope individually, it's going to be difficult.
What can I say? We could go on and on, but why give it all out when we could be coming back and tackling the issues one step at a time? I want to say thank you to you for coming, for joining me on this journey. This, I believe, will help somebody. And as we continue to tackle the different aspects of life, I pray that we can have the clarity, we will get rid of our fears and ask for the help that we need. It's like having a toothache, and when the doctor tells you to take Tylenol, you refuse to take Tylenol. You think you're strong because you have to deal with it. Prof, I am honored. I am happy that we've set out on this journey. I know I will benefit from it, and I pray that others will also benefit from it. Thank you, and we'll continue to be in touch. Like I said, please, you structure the journey for us so that we'll be going from one point to another until we all arrive at a place where we're comfortable within our skin, we're happy, and we're living fulfilled lives. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in. And again, it's Prof. McCarthy who is working with us to bring us answers, solutions, and things to help us deal with life. It is the Aidoo show, the show that aims to bring you hope, inspiration, and hope that one day you and I will say we have lived our full potential. Stay blessed. Tune in every Saturday from 12 to 1, and every last Saturday of the month, we come together with the Prof for some healing. That's what I'm calling it. Conversations for the soul. It is love from my heart to yours. Stay blessed and be encouraged, be inspired. Thank you, sir. Stay blessed.
Thank you.
TV.